Hey everyone, you're here with Mark Batwell and Dave Hansen on Perfect Gardens TV. So today we're here to tell you that there's more than just shit in bat guano. Let's go ahead and get into it. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. If you haven't checked out our monthly membership, I highly recommend to do so. Just for $2.99, your questions get sent to the top for quick replies. I'm asking for a little more support to build up my war chest so that I can continue to keep giving you open and honest reviews, and we can further defend our right for free speech. Thank you so much, everyone. All right, so you're here right now with Dave Hansen. Dave Hansen is one of our new content creators. And so how we are teaching and educating our content creators to make sure to provide a level of quality to you guys is we're just making sure that we're going through product lines. And so one of the new product lines that Dave really wanted to go through on the channel was Down to Earth. So right now we're going to go on to part 2, which is their bat guano. So Dave, will you go ahead and take over and talk about it and share your screen?
What's up, everybody? I hope everything is going good with you guys. If you haven't checked out part 1, I highly recommend go back in the thread, find part 1 and watch it. And basically it was just outlining a spreadsheet with all the products and the application rates. And now we're going to be diving into the individual products. So first up on the list, we have bat guano, and bat guano is coming in at a MPK of 731. I wanted to share this quote with you guys because tying in with organics and the importance of it to me and how we grow our food and our medicine. I found this quote and I wanted to share it with you guys. And it says, "The soil is the great connector of life's, the source and destination of all. It is the healer and restorer and resurrector by which disease passes into health, age into youth, death into life. Without proper care for it, we can have no community, because without proper care for it, we can have no life." And that was a quote by Wendell Berry. He did a lot of work in agricultural practices and showing the importance of our biology in our soil. So what is bat guano and what is its benefits? Of course, bat guano is derived from the feces of bats in these caves. And as the bats go out at night, they're massively feeding on millions and millions of insects and coming back in and doing their business. It's found to be a natural fungicide, which is going to help aid potentially these fungi taking over your plants. Studies have shown that bat guano helps control nematode populations. And if we remember, we have good nematodes and then there's not so good nematodes. And those bad nematodes are going to come in and actually infect your roots, lay their eggs. You get this bulbous root that happens, which is going to degrade the plant's ability to uptake water and nutrients. So it's been found to help control those populations. One thing that I really like, it helps speed up compost decomposition. And, for me, I have what I call the lazy man compost, where I basically, my children, we have scraps of food and we lay it out. And if weeds and clover and stuff overtake it, we're okay with it. And this is something that we can further aid into our compost to create that microbial life, that biology that's just going to further the soil's ability to help provide for the plant, which is super, super important when we're growing in organic. It is enriched with nitrogen, aiding in the health of green plants. So a lot of us, we look for that green leaf, even though that's not the only indication of a healthy plant. It is a sure sign that proper photosynthesis is happening, but we also remember through our other videos, things like iron also play a big role in the color and formation of those leaves. And like what I stated before, it helps further the diversity of our soil. It also contains and is packed with micronutrients, vitamins, minerals, and this is just furthering, I want to say, the complexity of your soil. When the plant has the ability to need something, communicate that down into the soil, and the bacteria and everything can retrieve it and bring it back, it's going to allow the plant to be its best and its healthiest form. If we look in the picture over here, we can see there's a pile of bat guano and there's different bugs and life that's forming. So it's not just about the guano, it's also about the life and the energy that also is brought into these areas for this bat guano. Things are feeding on it or feeding on the bacteria and the bugs on it as well. So it just shows you the complexity that it can bring to your garden. Mark, you have anything?
Yeah, as they're eating the bugs, is there any other additional benefits to possibly might be in the bat guano poop?
Yeah, and that's a really good question, because while most of these fertilizer manufacturers are not going to state it on their box, and it brings into that there's a potential for pesticidal controls with similar to insect frass, and that's the shells and remains left over from these arthropods. And so it could also be thought to in your practices can be incorporated with your IPM, because as life is eating and dying, this is all incorporated in this. So when man comes in and we take it, there's a lot of this further biological process that's being taken place. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Just the IPM, kind of talking about that a little bit more, right? Is that I'm not saying you don't go buy crab meal or insect flask, but we are saying that similar benefits of those natural insecticides or pesticides, Bat Guano will also provide that as well. So at the end of the day, if you're on a budget and you're not sure exactly what you should purchase, and you're like, oh, what do I buy? Because you might see the insect flask and the kelp meal, and you might see these other products that have nitrogen on there, right? And you're like, well, I want to buy these, but you don't have all the money. Well, just understand that Bat Guano is going to give you similar benefits or qualities as if you were giving insect flask, because of what it is eating and the shells it create. What's that specific chemical? It's not anthracite, but chitlin. I always mess it up. Chitlin. Yeah. And when you understand your products better, when you understand them, and if you're on a budget, this is where you'll be able to implement what you know to be able to save a little money and still get to where you want to go.
Yeah, absolutely. How to use Bat Guano. So, of course, you can amend your soil before you sow your new seeds or plants. So maybe you're just starting off and you buy maybe a good commercial quality brand of soil, and you want to further that, you can add that into that before you sow your seeds or transplant as well. It can be used as a top dressing for established plants, applied to the top of the soil and gently, of course, work into the soil. We want to make sure that we kind of get it in that substrate. So when we water through that it's going down into the soil. Added benefits when making your compost teas. So we have, you can see the picture, the typical, your 5-gallon bucket, your nylon with your product, and of course, aeration, which is extremely important. We won't get too much into proper tea methods, but if you are familiar with them, you can add that into your applications for your compost or worm casting teas. You can see here in the picture, we're kind of mixing up a super soil, we're amending it, and then we can see some established plants on the bottom that we can top dress with. And of course, add to your compost pile. I believe once we get to the application rates, I believe you can also use it as a foliar spray as well. So these are things to keep in mind. If you find that it does have an IPM that could be part of your IPM management, then maybe you can do a light foliar spray. But I highly recommend that you always follow the guidelines from the manufacturer and don't steer too far away from that. Have good practices with that.
If you were going to use it as a foliar spray, because some people, there's probably much more other products that are more beneficial to foliar spray. But again, I'll give you an example like drops of bounce. But if you don't have the money for these things, this is where what we're saying. I know we weren't going to dive too much into the tea side, but that's how you would use it as a foliar spray. You just basically get a teaspoon of your Bat Guano. You'd get some beneficial bacteria and fungi. So if you don't have any beneficial bacteria from a bag, go outside, look for living soil that there are worms. If there's worms in there, there's probably a good indication there's living bacteria in there. Grab a couple teaspoons, an ounce of it, put it into a sock. Now you have beneficial bacteria and fungi. You have some Bat Guano in that. You can use pantyhose, something that's just going to keep it from stirring, an aerator of some level, and then you're just going to let it brew. And these you can do other things. You can put insect flask, kelp. You could do make these things fancy, but this is kind of what he's talking about as a foliar spray. You want to try to make this material as water soluble as possible. Some of this is water soluble, but the majority of it isn't. And how to make it more water soluble is by activating it with the microbiology and the teas.
Yeah, no, excellent points. And as you enter the organics and you further your knowledge with individual products, and you learn to read your plants, and you've come across different deficiencies through strain from strain. Maybe you think you got it dialed in, then you introduce a new strain, you're like, oh dang it. These little experiments and the feedback loops that you're going to get from how your plant reacts to that, and you record that, it's just going to keep increasing your level, your knowledge, and having more tools available for when these problems do arrive. Very important. Guaranteed analyst. So we stated before, the 731 different brands there. I've seen them higher. And one thing to remember with the guaranteed analyst is this is the guaranteed. So there's guaranteed to be 731, but it can be a little bit higher. And I don't know those exact percentages, but that's one thing that I did want to pass along to the community, that I've learned that they can range a little bit higher. This is the bare minimal what they find when they do that. So NPK of 731, 7% nitrogen. It's a good amount to add into your soil. 1.8% of that is soluble. So going back to when we were talking about the teas and stuff like that, this nitrogen is this 1.8% is going to be more readily available. And then 5.2% insoluble nitrogen. So remember, that's going to be a little bit slower. I'm not saying it can't be sped up depending on how diverse and how proper your soil is and what state your plant is in. If you have a good microbial life and a good balance and things that, that engine's really amped up and running, is it 5 days? Is it 10 days? Is it 12 days? And this is where reading your plants is going to be super important. 3% phosphates, 1% soluble potash. Mark, you wanna help explain, like I was questioning with the phosphate, the P2O5, and can you kind of dive in a little bit to that, and then the further process that when it's broken down and available for the plant, please?
Sure. Just kind of get real light into this a lot. I think something that's overlooked in the industry a lot is that plants actually don't really take up P2O5. They take up H2PO4 negative. And I think, and that conversion happens through microbiology or through chemistry in the water. And I think this is where I always like to kind of point these small things out, is just be aware that microbiology, because you have microbiology that's breaking down that phosphate, and because you have that specific microbiology is then going on to actually produce all these other acids. And these acids then go on to help further break down other smaller trace minerals and make them more available so that they can do other functions in the plant. So it's important to kind of understand that and be aware of that, because a lot of people, you see the back of the bottle, it's phosphorus, but just remember that doesn't mean it's available yet. I think that's why a lot of times we're seeing purpling in the stems more often than not, is because we're putting it in there again, but it's not available. And then also just being aware that a 731, just like how Dave said, this is a minimum in there. So there could be more. And so how would this affect you? Well, this would affect you by, let's say you have a very short veg time and you want to flip them straight into flowering. Well, this might be a decent one, because you have that 4 weeks of veg, but just be aware that when the plant stops growing, it's going to still need some nitrogen. So you're still going to want to be incorporating some amino acids as it's going through its growth, but you're not going to want to be using something like bat guano later into flowering, because it might be producing excess leaf still, because because nitrogen has bacteria break these things down, it will want to take that up and make it more available than other stuff. Even that's been a thought process on the synthetic side, but I still would say that if that's the only food available, I bet you that would become more available to the plant as well later in flowering. So remember, this is more of a veg. If you have a short veg time, a couple weeks into flowering, that's fine, but you really don't want to be putting it onto your plants after that transition week.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. And, and depending on what your plant's going through, and if you were going through some hardcore deficiencies, it's going to take up what it wants and what it needs to properly process, the light and CO2 to convert to food and sugar and carbohydrates to drive down to those soil into the roots, into those bacteria. So I totally agree, amending earlier on. And then once we get into other products, we'll see what's better for those flowering processes. Application rates. So once again, you can go online and find this stuff as well. If you're doing your vegetable garden or flower beds outside, here's the application rates for that. Outdoor containers, which is I consider indoor as well. It's 1 to 2 tablespoons per gallon of soil. And then once again, if you're doing a top dressing, want to make sure that you kind of gently work that into the soil. You don't need to go too crazy so you're not tearing up your root system that's near the top of your soil. And then I always like to make sure we water thoroughly through. And then here, as I stated before, they talk about kind of a foliar spray liquid preparations. Add 1 to 2 tablespoons of water, let it steep for 48 hours. And steeping meaning the whole aeration in the bucket or whatever your methods are to promote the healthy bacteria and try to eliminate the bad bacteria. And then be sure to use all the solution at once when it's prepared. If you make a mistake and you make way too much than you needed or anticipated for, put it in your yard, put it next to a tree, put it in your flower beds. It's not wasted, but if you let it sit there without oxygen in 1 or 2 days in a hot environment, it's going to become extremely foul and you're going to be inviting bad bacteria and pathogens into your soil. And it's not always easy to recover from that. So make sure you're thinking these things through when you're going to be applying them, how you're going to be applying them. And there's always alternatives. Add it into the garden, add it into your grass, whatever. I guarantee you'll have a nice green patch wherever you dump it. And then moving forward to the available sizes that they have is 0.25 pounds, 2 pound, 10 pound, and 25 pound. And just keep in mind that if you are purchasing larger quantities, if you can, try to keep them in a sealed container for future use. Conclusions to be aware of. Bat Guano is great, but it's not going to be your only amendment. You're going to need additional nutrients into your soil. So this goes back to in our first video, we talked about that there are pre-made, 444s and stuff like that, but this will not be your only amendment for your garden. P and K deficiencies can occur if you only use this with flowering crops. And there's other videos here at Perfect Gardens outlining this. And then crops with vegetative state, only lettuce, non-large root structures, harvesting a vegetative only crop, not a flowering. Can you go over that thought, Mark?
Say that one more time.
Line 3. That's what you were talking about before?
Cross vegetative. Yeah. So for example, this is a crop that you have to think high in nitrogen, right? So it'd be great for lettuce. It's going to be for leafy lettuces, things that are going to be in a vegetative crop, especially where you're going to want to harvest it in that stage, so just keep that in mind for always encouraging you to use this for food. It can be used for anything into flowering as well, like tomatoes, cabbages, other stuff. But just if you are growing leafy lettuces and, you probably don't want to be using langonite or other stuff. You want to just be thoughtful around the nutrients and then the crops you're growing.
Right. So knowing your nutrients, knowing how to take full advantage of them, what crops will really benefit from them is really important. And NPK values can vary depending on Bat Guano's diet. This is something I just kind of researched and learned, and insect versus fruiting, but there's really not a big demand in high quantities of fruit bats. Their living style is different than the bats are going in the caves, and they're more in trees and stuff like that. But I did find that interesting. So if you do find different products on the market, there could be those variances in the nutrient depending on where the company is sourcing their Bat Guano. But overall, I think Bat Guano is a very good product to add into your lineup of nutrients when you're doing organic. There's a lot of extreme benefits. We're constantly talking about micronutrients, and this is a product that can help give you that and those vitamins and help the plant through those beginning stages of its life.
I love it, brother. I appreciate it so much. Thank you so much for coming on the channel and helping to break down this nutrient line. Guys, please remember to give this video a thumbs up. Dave is a new content creator, and so there's always a learning curve. If you go back to my first videos, I'm like, it's horrible. You know what I'm saying? So keep encouraging the content creators that are coming on this channel, because there are so many of you guys that are requesting product reviews, wanting to learn more. And personally, I'll never be able to get to these videos unless we're bringing on additional help. And so Dave, same as Aaron and Mike, are some of those other content creators that would like to make that effort to help bring on quality content for you guys. So please encourage them, post questions so that we can create follow-up videos around this. Thank you so much.
I was just going to say, make sure you like and comment. And if there's something, for our next video, comment below. What nutrient would you like to see next, so we can start working on that? And we're all learning and growing together. And I really appreciate and enjoy engaging in this community. You guys are wonderful. Just remember, we're all learning together. And that's the importance, to support each other. And we're going to benefit big time from it. So thank you very much. And
Thanks, bro. Appreciate you. Have a great day, guys. is I normally recommend for them to grow out all the strains they're growing. Keep the one, maybe two, but normally one strain that they absolutely love and get rid of all the rest. And to start to learn how to read the plant through plant deficiencies,